Welcome, everybody. This is January 15th, and it's time for Wednesday with Walton. Actually, it's late, and I apologize, but I had some travel issues during the day, and so I need to record late. But fortunately, our guest this week was flexible and willing to record with me on Wednesday evening. And of course, you can see his smiling face there. It's Kyle Reis, who everybody knows from Birds on the Black. He's a very prominent member of the Cardinals community in social media, has been for a number of years. His Prospects After Dark, where he interacts with the fans and talks in great deal about St. Louis Cardinals prospects. He also posts a lot of videos, so you need to follow him on Twitter, and it's Kyle R416. Posts a lot of videos during the season of prospects that you may not see otherwise unless you're really an addict of MILB TV. Kyle, welcome.
Brian, it's an incredible honor to be here speaking with you tonight. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're one of the first persons I thought of because you've been at this now. I've known you for probably 5 or 6 years. How did you get into, I know you've always been a Cardinals fan, but how did you get into focusing on prospects?
I guess the shortest version of the long story I could tell is when I was a kid, I was raised in the left field bleachers at Old Busch Stadium, and my dad was an usher, and those bleacher bums like raised me. So I was fortunate enough to go to a lot of Cardinals games on free tickets from bleacher bums. And they taught me about they taught me about baseball. I learned baseball from them, my dad and my brother Scott mostly. And I remember being really enamored at a young age with all of a sudden there's Jason Simon-Tachi and being like, oh, how do I want to know everything about Jason Simon-Tachi? And as you know, in the early days of the internet in prospect following, there wasn't a whole lot of information, so it would be a lot of digging. I graduated high school in 2004, and a lot of my friends went down to Missouri State. I'm from St. Louis, born and raised in St. Louis, and that became my quick gateway to watching minor league baseball. I would take the 2.5, 3 hour drive, spend the weekend watching baseball at Hammons Field in 2006, 2007, 2008. And that catapulted me into just trying to find every little thing I could online about the players who might come and impact the St. Louis Cardinals. And then that dovetailed right into the Memphis Mafia that ended up catalyzing a lot of fans' interest in the minor leagues for the Cardinals. So it was just a perfect storm of all of those things kind of on a line, on a track.
And it's an interesting time this year. All the players are new basically in the organization. I'm going to be spending more time basically all spring down here, down in Florida, where I am now, to really get to know the organization because it's a whole new ballgame in terms of how player development is going to be taking the guys that the scouting community delivers to the organization.
I cannot wait to get your coverage. I'm so excited about the Cardinal Nation's coverage, especially once spring training kicks in full gear because of all those changes. Different pitching coordinators. There's going to be different coaches with Jose Laguerre taking on a more prominent organizational role and not just being the Double A manager anymore. I'm fired up about the direction that the Cardinals organization is heading in from a farm standpoint, and that's not to diminish the role and the work of other people who have since moved on to different roles or are in retirement. It's just that, especially as the Cardinals themselves are kind of treading water a little bit right now, this is the most exciting aspect of what's going on in the organization.
And I think folks need to be patient. However, these guys aren't going to, do miracle magic work the first year. There's a lot of work to be done as people get to know one another. They decide what systems they're going to follow. And so, there will be certainly a transitional period, but, it's fun to see that the organization is finally going to get serious about the farm system after so many years of it starting to erode in terms of importance.
Yeah, tough timing. It was just the worst timing. The amount of technological advancements that happened so quickly, as the Cardinals seem to struggle, maybe financially coming out of COVID. It seemed like they never really got their momentum restored after COVID, and so it was a rough time to go through that ebb. And it's nice to see them adjusting and learning on the fly a little bit too.
Now, the other side of the coin, and I know you've been pretty outspoken about this winter. So far, the Major League Club hasn't made any outside moves bringing in talent. It's all been about shedding contracts and moving veterans out of the way to clear playing time. It doesn't seem like the youth movement involves, adding a lot of prospects like we saw in July 2023 with all those trades.
It's been so weird. They just seem so singularly focused on Nolan Arenado and what's going to happen with him. And reasonably so. That's such a huge contract and such not a huge personality exactly, but it's a huge member of your team that you're trying to make a decision about, and that is also trying to make a decision about his own future. But it seems like they're just so singularly focused on that some of those pitching things, they're just waiting to see what happens with Arenado before the pitching decisions before they make those moves. It was supposed to be after the season, after season presser, they started talking about opportunities, making opportunities for the young players, and they keep booing back and forth like someone like Michael McGreevy, who I've been critical of in the past, but he developed a new cutter. It's kind of changed the pitcher that he is. But like even now, he would have a bullpen role with the Cardinals more than likely, potentially. If you go into a battle, and I would just
He's still blocked by all those veteran starters. They
ex-
haven't moved the guys that are in the way.
exactly, and that's what I would like to see. Just one of those guys. Use that to help replenish the farm system and make it clear that Michael McGreevy, he has a spot in the rotation to lose. I'd like to see something like that for sure.
All right, so let's just switch gears now and talk about some players. Today, of course, the big news today, and part of the reason I also waited to have this session is the Cardinals announced their international signings, and not every organization did because everybody's sort of waiting for the dominoes to fall. Are the Dodgers going to get Roki Sasaki? And if they do, that's all their money. So all the guys the Dodgers were going to get are going to go to other organizations. Yeah. Well, the Cardinals obviously weren't involved in that because they announced their 12 guys today. Mm-hmm. They have a little over $5.6 million to spend on international. That's all they can spend. For this period of time. Of course, they lost $500,000 again for the second year in a row, this time for the signing of Sonny Gray a year ago. So within that budget, they announced 12 players today. One of them got $1.4 million. It seems to be the guy who's the jewel of this class. It was somebody that's been talked about for some time being committed to the Cardinals, and I'm talking about Royel Strop, an outfielder from the Dominican, who folks may remember. If you're like you and me both, Kyle, we probably booed Pedro Strop a lot when he was closing for the Cubs. What do you know about Strop? What do you know about Strop?
Well, we're learning about him. It seems like some of the other players in the class, we started getting a little bit more information about earlier on, and it seems like over the last week, Royelny Strop, the center fielder from the Dominican Republic, it seemed like he became their jewel, and he's a left-handed swinger who makes it depends on which evaluator you talk to. Some say that he has a pretty solid contact skill. Others say it still leaves a lot to be desired. When you talk to some of the Baseball America guys, they'll tell you that there's some power there. That's kind of what separates him from maybe some of the other prospects that the Cardinals signed today. Left-handed power is terrific too, but it's all pull side power right now. And he can find that left center field gap as a left-handed swinger, which for a 16-year-old, one of the younger kids in the class, apparently, these are all really positive, really solid things. Over the years, following the international classes, sometimes you get enamored with the contact skill, and really the prospects who make it ascend the minor league ladder are the ones that have power inherent. So it's nice to see that while he's a kind of a line drive, easy kind of stick, smooth swing in, maybe not reaching too much for power, he has it in the bat. There's still some questions about where he's going to play out in the outfield. He's 16 years old. There's just no telling. The Cardinals, I'm sure, will give him every opportunity to play center until he proves that he can't play the position. But look, he's the power. He's the little bit of power worth getting excited about from today's signings.
And Kyle was talking about Royelny Strop from the Dominican. A guy that they gave reportedly $750,000 to, so that's a pretty good sized bonus, is a catcher from Panama, Juan Rujano. And if you remember Panama, right, you think of Herrera, you think of several others in the system. It seems to be a hot spot for catchers.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Juan Rujano. There isn't a whole lot of video to find on any of these players. There's more on Royelny Strop than anyone else. But that Juan Rujano, he's the one I'm most excited about. I think that he's a little big for a catcher, but they said that about Leonardo Bernal a little bit too. He's lean, he's athletic, he's just kind of tall. And I like his swing from the right side. He could be the one on this group. I know Kenley Hunter is another really popular name to go to, but for me, maybe outside of the Strop of it all, Rujano is the one I'm most interested in. I think that you have a 16-year-old catcher that you can build on top of, who could fly underneath the radar, which I think benefits some prospects sometimes too, as they start their climb up the ladder.
And it's probably not fair for us to drop names like Herrera and Bernal, but yet they're his countrymen, and so you gotta at least think about that.
Yeah, yeah,
You meant you
absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned Kenley Hunter, outfielder from Nicaragua. Now, Nicaragua is not a place that a lot of folks go. Of course, Nicaragua, first thing I think of is Dennis Martinez, of course, who's a Hall of Fame caliber pitcher from Nicaragua. But Cardinals haven't had a lot of players from there. What do you know about Hunter?
He is kind of so one of the Nicaraguan players that have made a major league debut is Cheslor Cuthbert.
Oh,
And in some ways, there's that. Like his ultimate ceiling might be something like that. He's a small kid. He's super athletic, super fast. Most people think that he's going to stay in center and that he probably has an above average arm for center field. Where I question, it goes back to the power of it all. And you just never know with the 16-year-old. He's just kind of small and svelte. He doesn't have tremendous bat speed. But again, this is all things that will grow with time. But he's more of a contact oriented hitter. And if he can carry that contact orientation with him, maybe continue to hone his plate discipline, then he'll rise quickly because of his ability to make contact. The question is just how much power will he grow into, and he doesn't have that upper end speed that someone like Michael Ciane or Victor Scott II has. So it's an interesting piece of clay with a lot of potential, a lot of athleticism, and a lot of raw abilities that you would want out of a 16-year-old. It's just a matter of how they will continue to grow over time.
And Kyle was, of course, talking about Kenley Hunter, center fielder from Nicaragua. Anybody else? We don't have time to talk about all 12, but was there anybody else in that list that stood out to you that you want to cover here?
Yeah, the only other name, I know that the Cardinals are big on the shortstop from Venezuela, Miguel Hernandez. Again, I have not seen any video of him or heard much about him other than that he's kind of a wiry shortstop who will probably stick at shortstop. It's just a matter of how his bat develops. And then the one arm that they have that's really interesting, not to disparage any of the other young arms that they signed, is Daniel Gomez, right-handed pitcher out of Venezuela. He according to Baseball America, he lives in the low 90s. He's a command first pitcher. Has a changeup that's advanced for his age. He's still working on a third pitch, and he's kind of along the lines of your number 37 pick on the 50 Days, 50 Nights, Keiverson Ramirez. He has similar qualities to that as far as a low 90s fastball with some projectability and size that is a little ways away, but commands the ball pretty well.
And Kyle hit on an interesting point that I want to mention. I'm interested in your opinion on this or your perspective. Of the 12 players the Cardinals announced today, only 2 of them were pitchers. And this is an organization that needs pitching. Now, they have been more pitching heavy in past international classes. Is this any kind of a signal to you, or is it maybe just how things landed for them?
It's probably how things landed. It's so tough. Everybody talks about it, but they make these, and obviously, Brian, they have those handshake agreements with these kids for so many years. And as you talk about with the Roki Sasaki, Cardinals probably don't have another signing in them, but there might be some fallout that they might try to be advantageous of. I
just want to stop me. Pardon me for interrupting you, but they will in fact sign. Historically, they'll sign 4, 5, 6 guys that'll kind of trickle out throughout the year. So I don't think they're done here.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. I think that I think it's more chance than anything, and then maybe they have their eye on a couple other people. What's really interesting to me is I feel like it's been a long time since they haven't signed somebody in the international class who was older. And potentially from Cuba. It always seemed like they had, over the last couple of years, there's always like one pitcher or, you go back to Jose Dolis Garcia or Randy Rosarena, even then, where there was one, and they were older, but like there was one 20-year-old, Ruben Menes, someone like that. And I'm surprised that they haven't signed anybody like that just yet.
Yeah, well, there's been some change in the Cardinals scouting community as well internationally. Matt Slater, who is instrumental in all the Asian signings, left the organization at the end of the year. So, it could be that, there's some changes there that will still roll out.
Yeah.
Now, when I was talking to Kyle about what should we cover tonight, he mentioned that he wanted to cover some of the top prospects in the system. And the names he mentioned are names that you probably know the names, but Kyle probably has a unique perspective on them that you ought to listen to. Let's start with the number 1 guy, JJ Wetherholt. Wow. What should fans look for with him? And How high should expectations be for Wetherholt? I've had people ask me, and this is people in the fantasy community who are trying to figure out, okay, do I draft Wetherholt this year? How many at-bats is he going to get with St. Louis in 2025?
Yeah. For me, he's a 2026 guy. That is not to diminish how exciting of a player he is. He is contact first with surprise amount of pop. He's just a baseball rat. Where he's going to play in the field, I think is still up for debate. I think he can stick it short. Question, of course, with Mason Wynn, how does it all work out? I think he's athletic enough that he could have a very Brendan Donovan-esque role with the Cardinals when he does eventually make his major league debut.
Question, son, I'm going to interrupt you there and ask you. We've seen shortstops move to center field before. The Cardinals have a huge problem in center field. Am I missing something here?
So, Brian, that is what I was trying to be very veiled about in my suggestion. I would love to see him get a run in center field. Again, no disrespect to Victor Scott II, or even Matt Koperniak's ability to play center field here and there a little bit. But yeah, like I do. I think that somewhere along the lines, if in 2025, Mr. Wetherholt is knocking on the door, I would not be surprised at all if they just give him a little run in center just as an opportunity. Because I do believe he has that type of baseball IQ, those type of instincts that he could. It might take him a while to get up to a level, but he could get average at that. He's a baseball player, and I hate to default to that because it's so hard to quantify. But he's a rat. He's a baseball rat who just wants to play the game, is competitive, and wants to help his team however he can.
And let's face it, center field after Victor Scott, there isn't much in the pipeline. Second base, there's like 3 options on the major league roster already, and then you've got guys in Memphis. I mean, there are other guys who can fill that pipeline. So it'd be interesting to watch and see what they do with Wetherholt. Hopefully, if they do a position change or try it, they'll do it relatively early so that it doesn't impede his progress to St. Louis.
Absolutely. And that's what this year is. That's the mission statement of this year, right? From the Cardinals. We focused a lot on the major league side of it all, but that should also go with the minor leagues. If this was going to be an opportunity season, not just for the major leagues, it should also apply to the minor leagues too. So there's no reason to rush him. Let him develop at his own pace. And then as we get closer to the end of the season, maybe the Cardinal season's going better than we all hope, or going as well as we all hope, rather. And they can kind of adjust and see where it goes and maybe put himself in a position to be a starting center fielder or a share time center fielder in 2026 with a little position flexibility here and there.
Yeah. All right, so a guy who did move fast, played 4 levels this year. Of course, everybody knows we're talking about the pitcher of the year in the system, Quinn Mathews. Is Mathews ready for a major league rotation? Does he need more time in Memphis? What do you think he needs to do? By the time he got to Memphis, of course, he didn't dominate, at least in his first few starts like he did, but he'd already thrown like 140 innings in the year, as his first year as a professional. So, I think it was quite a successful year with Mathews, but again, he's another guy expectations are going to be very high for.
Yeah, so part of what prompted me to want to talk about the top prospects is earlier in the week, Baseball Prospectus listed their top 100 prospects in baseball. Wetherholt was 13, Quinn Mathews was 27. And for me, like, I like that. I think anytime you get prospects on the top 100 list, it's awesome for the organization. It's awesome for the players. But for me, it's the cerebral part of Quinn Mathews' games. We have the measurables. You guys, you and Blake did a tremendous job going over all of that. The measurables are there, but Quinn Mathews is determined to pitch next year at the major league level. And just like last year in spring, as the Cardinals entered spring training, like I said, as the Cardinals entered the offseason, the strength and conditioning team gave him a strength and conditioning program that he cites in nearly every interview about how beneficial it was for him to build velocity and stay healthy throughout the year. And I think that it's my understanding that that's going on again this offseason. And that's all good. So, yeah, I don't know if he'll be ready day one. I would hate for the Cardinals to put him in that position. I always tend to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to, but I do think that if he stays healthy, that there's a real chance that if Steven Matz stays with the club and he gets hurt 2 months into the season, like he sometimes can, that Quinn Mathews might not. Yeah, sometimes that Quinn Mathews might be the perfect segue into that role. Yeah, I do. I think he's close to being ready.
Now, a year ago, if we would have had this conversation, the guy we would have been talking about in this context wasn't Mathews, it was Tink Hence.
Yeah.
And Tink Hence, continues to dominate when he's on the mound, but he missed, huge chunks of the season. Again, didn't get I guess he got 80 innings over the course of the year. But At what point in time do you look at a young man who was drafted in 2020 and say, if he can't go 120 pitches, if he can't go 5 or 6 innings, do you do something else to get him to the major leagues more
Yeah,
quickly in a role that he can contribute in, or do you continue to try to be patient?
it's funny. He and Roby both being high school drafted players
In
in
the
the
same
same
class?
year. Yeah, exactly. It's, you have to be a little bit more patient with the high school, the prep players, of course. Takes a little bit more time, but those are two different bodies, of course. But yeah, look, I think that this is really, we probably said this last year too. I'm probably just regurgitating something I said last year, but this really is the year for both of them. Both of them, if they can stay healthy, will make a major league debut this year. More than likely, both will be out of the bullpen. They might get a spot start. Maybe Tink Hence gets the Jaime Garcia treatment where he makes a start and hopefully doesn't get hurt after the start and a half that he makes, and then spends a little bit more time in the minors. But I do think that this is the year. I think this is the year that if they both stay healthy, we'll see them both in the majors and more than likely out of the bullpen, depending on the opportunities that are created for them.
We'll probably have time to maybe talk about one more guy. Jimmy Crooks was the player of the year in the Cardinals system, MVP in the Texas League. Really did a nice job. Also threw out roughly 25% of runners, trying to steal against him. So, he has some defensive chops too. But I mean, obviously Crooks is going to be the guy at Memphis this year. But where's he going to fit in the picture long term? What do you think is going to, how will the catching shake out?
It's going to be a crazy year to watch behind the plate this year. Not just with the top name guys, Bernal and Crooks, and then of course Herrera and Pajes, but even down, Sammy Hernandez is really interesting. What they decide to do with him, I like that. Granted, he's a collegiate player from Oklahoma. He has a very strong Oklahoma following and fan base.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm excited that he's going to, barring any injury to Pajes or Herrera, he's going to get a full season at AAA to continue to work on his line drive swing because he has a little bit of loop in his swing, but it's a lot of line drives, and I think that that's good in some ways. And I know but it reminds me of Andrew Kisner when Kisner was down at the minors because he would just find those two gaps. It would just be gap to gap to gap, and then in a count where he could take advantage of it, he'd pull a home run. And I think that he just needs a little bit more seasoning. But look, I love Jimmy Crooks. I think that especially his ability to hit lefties, how he's made the adjustment to improve his ability to hit lefties. And he's a clubhouse guy. All of those pitchers love throwing to him. I think he might be a self-described bro, whatever that means
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And he has a little brother who plays baseball that he likes to talk a little bit of trash to. So he's a really interesting guy with, it seems like, all of the things that just need a little bit more seasoning. And Brian, as you know, we've talked about it a lot. The catching position takes the longest time to develop, and maybe might be the most veil covered that you see in the minors. You might think, oh man, look at him, he's so close, but really, the toll of the tools of ignorance at the major league level is a whole different beast.
Yeah, and you talked about his physical skills and his abilities, but you also touched on the mental side. I mean, this guy, it's hard to put my finger on, but he has a personality of a leader, and you can just see it when you talk to Jimmy Cook. When you can see him interact with others, he's got that quiet confidence. It's not the slap you in the face, but he's got that quiet confidence you want to see in a leader behind the plate. And so, like you said, it'll be fun to watch him develop this year at Memphis. And like you said, who knows what's going to happen in 2026? But I imagine the Cardinals catching situation will look different then than it does now.
Yeah, that's gonna be a real roller coaster to watch in the next couple of years. Even with Wilson Contreras moving to first, I'm really anxious to see how that 4-pack of Herrera, Pajes, Crooks, and Bernal shake out.
Well, we're near the end of our time for this edition of Wednesday with Walton. I again want to thank my guest this week, Kyle Reis. And again, you can follow him at all his work at Birds in the Black and Kyle R416 on Twitter. I guarantee you, if you follow Kyle, you will learn more about Cardinals minor leaguers than you knew before. And you will be entertained while you're at it.
I'll try not to be so blue. I promise. We'll keep it adult. We'll keep it PG 13 ish. I promise.
Well, here we will. If you want to go to Prospects After Dark and you're prepared for a little more excitement, a little more fun, then make sure you go there as well when Kyle has those sessions, which are highly entertaining and informative. And he interacts with his community, which is great because folks like to be able to get to people and find out what they're thinking. And that's part of the reason I had Kyle here today. What's going on at the Cardinal Nation? We're still getting the follow-on articles to the top 40 where I slice and dice the lists and look at them 18 different ways to Sunday. But also the prospect guide, the 2025 prospect guide, is in edit mode right now. It'll hopefully be going to the printer by this weekend. So we're taking pre-orders both for the printed guide, the spiral bound guide, and the PDF version of the guide. And if you subscribe to the Cardinal Nation, you get the PDF at half price, which is a great deal. I will be seeing Kyle this weekend, hopefully at Winter Warm Up in St. Louis, and I'll get some interviews from there, some exclusive things on the minor leagues that I think folks will like. So as always, consider joining the Cardinal Nation. I think you'll find the money that you spend will be worth your while. Kyle, thank you again for spending the time to come with me on Wednesday with Walton.
Brian, it was an extreme pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, and hopefully we'll have you again in the future here. We'll continue to have guests come in here with me, and as I figure out the future course of this. But Kyle, thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Have a great night.